If, and that's a big if, Measure 114 becomes law in its current form, here's what it would require. In order to buy a gun, you'll have to get a permit. It's expected to cost about $65, and you'll have to complete an approved firearm safety course. You'll have to pay for that one too. You'll also have to submit to a photo ID, get fingerprinted, and pass a criminal background check. Your local sheriff's office or police department would do the permit applications, and the Oregon State Police would do the background checks. Then all of that information would go into a database. The measure also bans magazines that hold more than 10 bullets. And let's just pause for a second, because I know that term magazine seems kind of goofy to those of you not familiar with guns, but it refers to the thing that holds the bullets or the rounds that are part of the gun. All right. The first lawsuit came in Friday. A Marion County gun store owner, along with the Sherman County Sheriff and the Oregon Firearms Federation, they all argue the new law violates the Second Amendment, which protects the rights to bear arms. The lawsuit specifically focuses on that magazine part of the law. In the filing documents, the plaintiff's lawyer wrote, "Many of the nation's best-selling handguns and rifles come standard with magazines that can hold more than 10 rounds, and firearms equipped with such magazines are safely possessed by law-abiding citizens in the vast majority of states." It continues, "The reason for the popularity of these magazines is that in a confrontation with a violent attacker, having enough ammunition can be the difference between life and death." They go on to argue, banning magazines over 10 rounds is no more likely to reduce criminal abuse of guns than banning high horsepower engines is likely to reduce criminal abuse of automobiles. Well, we wanted to know how likely the lawsuit is to be successful, and so we turned to a constitutional law professor, Norman Williams. He's at Willamette University, and he said he's not surprised the lawsuit focused specifically on that magazine capacity.
Both California and Washington have similarly banned high-capacity magazines. And the California ban was initially upheld by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit as not violating the Second Amendment. That decision, which was a year ago, was then appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court this past June struck down a New York public carry law. And after deciding the New York case, the U.S. Supreme Court vacated the Ninth Circuit's decision upholding California's ban and sent it back to the Court of Appeals to decide again in light of what the U.S. Supreme Court had said about Second Amendment gun rights.
So did you follow all that? Some of these big cases can affect each other. So to sum up, a lower court ruling initially ruled that the magazines that hold a lot of bullets could be banned in California. But then the U.S. Supreme Court made a ruling on guns involving a case from New York that expanded gun rights there. And then the judges decided that ruling, well, that might apply to the California case as well. So they told the lower court to go back and look at that California case now again. The New York case is New York State Rifle Association versus Bruen, and the Measure 114 lawsuit actually references it. The case is a little different than what we're looking at here in Oregon. It's centered around a law that forced people applying for a concealed carry permit to show they had a cause or some kind of a justifiable need to carry the gun. The court ruled that no other constitutional right requires showing special need to exercise it. And further, this is a key thing, by the way, that gun restrictions are constitutional only if there is a historical tradition of that regulation in the U.S.
This past June, the U.S. Supreme Court decision in New York versus Bruen adopted a new methodology for deciding the scope of Second Amendment gun rights. The U.S. Supreme Court was emphatic that for a measure to pass constitutional review, proponents of the gun regulation would have to demonstrate that in 1791, similar measures were in existence, that the right to bear a firearm in 1791 wouldn't have been viewed as infringed by that same type of measure. And as the dissenting judges in the Ninth Circuit decision had said a year ago, it was clear that in 1791, there were no bans on high-capacity magazines, that gun regulations in 1791, when the Second Amendment was adopted, permitted individuals to have firearms that were able to fire multiple rounds in a short period of time. And so in light of that very historically rooted approach to assessing gun rights, I think it's going to be very difficult for Oregon, California, Washington, and other states to be able to survive a Second Amendment challenge to a ban on high-capacity magazines.
Isn't that amazing? Reaching back 200 years plus. Wow. So that part might be in trouble. But Professor Williams says he does think that the other portions of the law, those requiring permitting and firearm safety training, he thinks those will hold up in court.
Oregon's permit requirements are not all that different from other states. The most significant addition that Oregon made is the requirement that you be fingerprinted as part of the permit application. But a number of other types of professions here in Oregon are subject to similar fingerprinting requirements. Every Oregon attorney, for instance, has to be fingerprinted before they are admitted to the practice of law. And so it's a procedural burden, but it's one that I don't think is going to prevent many law-abiding individuals from being able to obtain a permit. Similarly, the requirement that gun owners or permit applicants receive training, already a number of firearm owners already go through that. Measure 114 provides that if you've already gone through the training, you don't have to go through it again if the training you went through meets the standards set by law enforcement. And so while I understand that opponents of the measure like to say this is going to make it really difficult to purchase firearms in Oregon, I do think that objection is overstated.
The lawsuit also argues that the measure puts a huge burden on state police, local police, and sheriff's offices to implement it, and that they have to do it quickly. It's set to take effect on December 8th. The suit points to the Oregon Constitution, which says if the state requires a local government to establish a new program, then the state needs to pay for it, and that's not happening under Measure 114. Oregon State Police say they are getting ready for the new law, by the way. They told us OSP is working diligently to ensure we are prepared for implementing our portion of Ballot Measure 114 by December 8th of 22. At this time, our team is still working on that process, and we will communicate it to the public as soon as we are able. Professor Williams says he believes the court will likely put an injunction on Measure 114. That means it would be stopped from taking effect at least until that permitting and training process can be put into place. Opponents of the measure say they have many more concerns with the law, including some big picture ones. We talked with the Oregon Hunters Association. They don't see how the new gun law will stop gun violence, and they believe the conversation about guns, that needs to be much broader.
I was raised in a family where firearms were around, and so they weren't something that was frightening to me. And I took a lot of pride in being proficient in them. And so I'm very used to them. I'm very used to handling them. And so for me, it's not a scary thing. Whereas I understand somebody who has not been raised around them and has seen them only as a tool for violence has a very different approach and comfort level with them. And so I think what you said before about, people felt like they needed to do something, that is spot on. And I understand people do feel like they need to do something to feel safer, something to try to take steps against the violence that we're seeing, the uptick, particularly in the metro areas. The unfortunate thing for me is that I think there's been a lot of misplaced trust put in this measure as that something.
But on the other hand, the chief petitioner of Measure 114, a pastor in Northeast Portland, told us enough is enough. He said he's seen and heard from too many people affected by gun violence.
The key is for all of us, is that this was put on the ballot for the sake of our children and youth. The number one cause of death in this country of children and youth is gun violence. 55,000 Americans a year. Oregon, it's gone up. And so this was put on there for public health. And all of us want to see public health. And it's not just our children who are fearful of being shot, but the impact it has to them emotionally and mentally, if they're close to one or know about one, what the impact it has on them spiritually, and the impact it has on them and their social fabric. So this is about public safety, safe schools, safe communities, and it's been proven to save lives. This is a well put together, it's going to save lives, and that's it. And so all of us want that. So when it becomes law, I would expect everyone to uphold that and work with it and make Oregon even safer.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here tonight, and there's still a lot to talk about with this law. We'll be following the court challenges and the efforts by law enforcement to set up the new permit and training process and concerns that people on both sides of the gun safety conversation have about privacy, for example. We also want to hear from you. Whether you're watching this live or you're watching it later, write in, let us know what you think. You can email us. Our address is thestory@kgw.com. You could also give us a call. Call and leave a voicemail on our number. The number is 503-226-5090.